Is everything we've been told about the Las Vegas mass shooting a lie? Are they covering up something big? Here's what they've told us happened on October 1st, 2017, known as the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. A gunman by the name of Stephen Paddock opened fire from his hotel suite on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino, then targeted the crowd below attending the Route 91 Harvest Music Festival across the street. He had multiple firearms. He shot continuously for about 10 minutes. He killed 58 people, injured more than 850 people, all before taking his own life as police closed in on him. But that might not be the story at all. Xander Arena is an independent researcher, and he's been studying this for years, and he may sort of blow the lid off of this story once and for all. Xander, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, Clayton. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to share this information with you and the audience. What we're going to cover today is unsettling, but exceedingly important. I became aware of these facts because I had friends that were at the event. And at the time, I was an active parent. Caveat, I'm going to ask for some grace with the audience. Our 20-year-old son died this summer, and it has been a tragic event that is, it reverberates through my psyche. So I understand what it is to lose somebody very close to you. This process of describing what happened here is going to be more challenging than it might have been a year ago.
Xander, what moved you to start to study this subject?
Well, when I observed what I was seeing on the news versus what I was hearing from friends that were at the event, I understood that we were being lied to again in a mass casualty situation that, in effect, was kinetic warfare upon the citizens of this country. We only lost less than 100 people that day, but over 20,000 people were in attendance. There were shots fired at an enormous crowd, and it could have been disastrously worse. So I felt that it was important to spend time and energy into trying to resolve the truth of the event, to get answers, really frankly, to protect all of us. And I just would like to say it's been an unsettling adventure because, this is a major crime in a city not far from where I live, which by definition involves nefarious people. And the story that I'm going to present to you today is not so much, it's a little bit about who may have been actually involved, but it's more about the failure of the agencies that are designed to protect us, the people, and maybe what we can all do about that going forward.
So Xander, off the top there, I sort of gave a little summary of what the mainstream media has put out about this mass shooting. Was that an accurate assessment of how the mainstream media has told us this story?
Yeah, I think that is exactly correct. That is what we were all told. That is what I continue to read when I look at anniversary journals, or, if it is ever covered in the media, that is what you'll hear or read. That's what Wikipedia will tell you, et cetera, et cetera. But the facts that are going to be presented today will show you that that is not at all what actually happened. I recently watched the interview that Tucker did with Jason Aldean, and I mean, it seems as though people that were there in the forefront are still searching for answers as to what happened. And I think that what we're going to see today is going to really open the door to those truths. So the 2017 shooting is effectively a public myth at this point, and we're going to unravel the myth. 2017 Harvest Music Festival, 20,000 people in attendance, many hundreds injured by gunfire, 60 citizens murdered. In total, 2 died in the years to follow from injuries from that event. Here are the victims. I'll ask for some grace from the audience. I've recently lost my own child. I understand what it is to lose those dear to you. And I know that the facts of the matter are what are most important. Right off the bat, we're going to cover a body double. This is Stephen Paddock. Stephen Paddock had attached earlobes. This is evident from all imagery of this individual in the years preceding the event. This is a full body headshot taken by LVMPD officers entering the room of the decedent in the room 32-135 suite. You will note that he had detached earlobes. We can see that quite clearly on this individual's right ear and also on his left. This is the undersheriff for LVMPD in a public press conference, and he is describing the fact that the images which were leaked to the public are authentic.
There was a question about the validity of the crime scene photos that somebody had leaked. I can confirm those are, in fact, photos from inside of the room. They're, in fact, photos of our suspect. And as the sheriff mentioned previously, we have all opened up an internal investigation to determine the source of the leaks of those photos to the public.
So what we learned from this is that it's the wrong body. Now, how can we say something so definitively? Frankly, it's easy. This is an attached earlobe. This is a detached earlobe. This is an irreconcilable difference. This is not a debatable feature of this event. Here we've got Wired Magazine discussing how the auricle of an ear can be used as an identifying feature, perhaps even better than fingerprints. Our outer ear anatomy is unique to each of us. But barring that fact pattern, this ear is obviously different. We don't need AI to tell us that. Here is the FIT report, which was released to the public. This is the only publicly available image of this decedent, officially released from the LVMPD. This is a low resolution kind of lateral view. And as we look at this ear, it looks as though this ear is perhaps photoshopped. We have some kind of weird, like, hybrid attached, detached earlobe that neither matches the decedent photo or the images of Stephen Paddock. There's a lot of problems with the way this ear is presented. The other thing to note here is that this body has what's called lividity, and so that is like the settling of the blood. Note from this body cam footage that when the LVMPD breached the room, there was already advanced livor mortis at the time of the breach. So this is approximately 1 hour after we're told this individual died. And you'll see right here that he's got this hard line of lividity there on the head. This is indicative of a person being dead maybe 4 to 6 hours, if not more. Yet this is 1 hour after we're told the shooting stopped. Note this large blood pool off to the side. We're missing that large blood pool off to the side. It looks like this body's perhaps been moved. And we note that the antihelix is a different shape than Stephen Paddock. The earlobe is detached. The crux helix is contiguous with the antitragus. So what that means is that on this image that was released to the public, this ridge or feature is continuous, which is totally inconsistent with how Stephen Paddock's ear was. So there's a number of problems with the ear, but the easiest feature to note is simply the attached versus detached. So what do we do with this? Well, we started looking into it. And I say we, it was myself, but there were other researchers in the Las Vegas community who dove into the medical records. And all of these records, these PDFs, are available at vegastruth.org. You can download the PDFs and you can review them in detail. And so we're going to find that the autopsy of this room 32 decedent showed that the height was wrong, the eyes were wrong, the scars were wrong, the teeth were wrong, and there was no time of death indicated other than the toe tag delivery time. There was also blunt force injuries to this person's calves and just a whole host of problems with the autopsy. So when we compare those records to Stephen Paddock's FAA medical records, because he was a pilot, he had to get a physical every 2 years, we can prove these discrepancies. So Paddock was 6'3", and the decedent in the room was 6'1". Paddock had blue eyes, the decedent in the room had brown eyes. Paddock had a scar on his back, the decedent had no scar on his back. There are so many problems. And present at the autopsy were these individuals. And during the autopsy, there were photographs taken, which is standard course of action. And so let's try to prove if there's a problem. There were efforts made to garner additional evidence. And so we requested from LVMPD the images from the crime scene and also images from the autopsy. And what we were told was that the shooter had a right to privacy and that therefore they could not release any of those images to the public. We countered with a request to at least reveal the logs or like the file numbers of images taken. And they made a very curious reply saying that after diligently researching the request, it was determined that LVMPD is not in possession of any evidence logs, records of images, lists, graphs, charts, file numbers, indices, etc. of crime scene photos taken of the decedent or of room 32-135. LVMPD has no records responsive to your request. Additionally, we suggest contacting federal authorities. So that's just a very strange situation.
Yeah. So they have no record of it. So crime scene investigators show up, they're on the scene, they're in the room, we see them in the room, right? They have no
Correct.
photos, they have nothing. They have nothing. You need to talk to the feds. Okay, sure.
Yep, that's exactly right. And all we were asking for was the very image that they had released in their own FIT report. And I simply asked for a higher resolution of the very same picture. It's the image that's found on page 90 of the FIT report. So a very strange response. This is a screenshot of the body cam footage. Again, you can see that really large blood pool. You see all the blood settling on this individual. I'll share with the audience, there were reports of a single gunshot fired from the hotel sometime early afternoon that day. I believe there was a 911 call on that. I don't know if that was this person getting killed or not, but it's something to note. So here are the discrepancies that we've covered so far. The ears don't match, the wrong eye color, the wrong height, the scars don't match. The decedent was missing most of his maxillary teeth, and so that appeared from the autopsy record to be more of like just missing teeth, not from a gunshot. There were macules found on the skin, which were noted that weren't any part of Paddock's medical record. Advanced livor mortis, the time of death is wrong. And the only way in which the identity was confirmed was by fingerprint analysis, but the public has no chain of custody on those prints. So, everybody present, I guess perhaps was told this is Paddock, and the way in which they proved that to folks was to say fingerprints matched. But again, with all of the other things that do not match, clearly those fingerprints cannot be correct. All right, we're going to talk about something else here. This is an EC-130 rotary aircraft taken between the Mandalay Bay and Delano. My wife and I went to Vegas. I took this picture personally. These are tour aircraft. They have a low audio signature. They're not very loud. They're quiet, and they run the strip on helicopter tours frequently. So these helicopters will transmit transponder data to an airport, particularly in Class Bravo airspace, which is what McCarran is. And these transponders are part of normal aviation. And what's curious is that 3 tour helicopters turned their transponders off about 20 minutes before the shooting began. We're going to take a look at that. This is one of the helicopters in question. It has a tail number. Here's another one, different tail number. And here is a third with the additional tail number. Now, this presentation I'll put on vegastruth.org, and so folks can review the details of this if you can't pull it from the screen that you're watching now. But this information was captured from Flight Radar 24, which is a live reflection of aircraft activities in the United States and actually around the entire world. Flight Radar 24 was contacted about this event and asked to preserve this data offsite, offline, because of the important implications of the data that they had collected. So here's a quick screen recording. I'm just going to run through this. You can see these tour helicopters taking off. Those 3 little dots are going up the strip. They're going to loop around. They come back down, and then bam, that is the loss of a transponder signal. Here's another loss of transponder signal. And then here's the third loss of transponder signal. That's a very curious event to have happened on such a pivotal day. We may never have seen that. I took the high def video and I slowed it down to 0.25 speed and looked at the airspace. And in that airspace, you see these kind of curious optical anomalies, these flashes of light coming from the airspace. And so the first question, of course, is, well, what is that? Is it an artifact of the image, or is it something that's really there? I've independently corroborated these optical flashes from other concert goer video, and it is the only location in the footage where you see such events. So we don't think this is optical anomaly. It correlates exactly with the airspace where the transponders went dark. So let's try to suss out what this is and what's going on here. The best way to do that would be to get the actual radar records from McCarran, and I FOIA'd the FAA to do so. So we'll quickly talk about the photography, or the notion that those might have been pictures, because to take a quick little side tunnel here, the research community wondered if they were perhaps people taking pictures. And if we think about that, there would be no reason to take pictures from helicopters between the hotel. And for all the reasons listed on this mega slide here. Firearm muzzle flash is a regular reddish, white, or yellow. Navigation lights are going to be red, green, or flashing white like a strobe light. And so none of that is consistent with what we observed. It is most consistent with suppressed muzzle flash. Suppressed muzzle flash is actually much brighter than unsuppressed muzzle flash when viewed from the line of fire. This is what a transponder route should look like along the strip. You know, it comes up, tours the strip, comes back. This is what many of the paths look like. There's a break, then the shooting occurs, and then about 20-30 minutes later, that same aircraft takes off again from McCarran and then does another side route. They were directed away by the controllers. So wanted to figure out what the heck was actually going on there. So I FOIA'd the FAA. Well, I asked for the records of those tail numbers, the flight logs, the raw radar records, meaning like the primary radar, not the secondary, where you have the transponder information, but I also wanted the raw radar record. And I got a very strange response back from FAA, and that was to say that they had no records of the listed tail numbers. They had no records of the aircraft. And for me to keep in mind that they only track things that are under instrument flight rules. So that didn't seem like an accurate response from FAA. I brought it to a local airport. I discussed it with some professionals over there, and they said, "Yeah, they're lying. They're holding something close to their chest." And the gentleman I was speaking to turned over his shoulder, and he pointed to a helicopter on the tarmac, and he said, "You see that one there? Well, that helicopter has its transponder on right now. It has to. It's Class Bravo airspace. So they're definitely hiding something." I spent the Martin Luther King weekend of 2018 reviewing all of Title 14 FAA, and I wrote an appeal. And I explained to them all the ways in which they should have the records of those helicopters. And one curious thing about this response that I got, it was given by a gentleman named Michael Artist. And what's curious about that is that he'd been with the FAA for a long time, so long, in fact, that he was actually involved in tracking Flight 93 in 2001, if you can believe that. So this gentleman should have known that the FAA had those records. And it was strange that he was the one that authored the response. We'll just leave that there. In the appeal to FAA, I cited all of the regulations, the CFR that requires them to have those records. I also went to atclive.net and got the audio transmissions of the controllers speaking to those helicopters. And so I was really able to prove on a number of levels that not only did they have the records, but they should have the records and they should produce the records. And the response that I got from them was to say that the information requested is part of an ongoing Federal Bureau of Investigation criminal law enforcement matter, and that the premature release could hinder their investigation. All right, well, I had lots of reasons at this point in my life to not trust the results of FBI investigations. I mean, one just need to look back to numerous assassination attempts or other things, or particularly 2001, where no investigation into controlled demolition was ever conducted in New York, despite hundreds of first responders reporting explosives, all of the work in the 9/11 Truth Movement, just the mountains of reasons that the mythology around that event should be different in the American public's eye right now. So yeah, I had some trust issues. And as such, I shared some of that information with IntelliHub back in the day. They were able to post it up on their website. And I did redacted versions to protect, myself, my wife, my kids, my home, and even those involved at the FAA. We're clearly dealing with bad people, and so there was no reason to put everybody's situation in a bad spot, I felt. A curious thing happened a couple of days after IntelliHub posted the redacted version of those requests. Somebody reached out to them to state that a CIA SOD unit had effectively been the ones to conduct that operation. Now, whether this is true or not, I don't know. I'm just sharing with the audience that IntelliHub did receive this report within days of publishing the redacted FOIA requests. And as this user indicates, it appears that we might have fleshed out some more whistleblowers. So I wondered if we could see the helicopters in question that turned their transponders off with closed circuit television. So I asked the Nevada Department of Transportation to please release the footage that they take from their closed circuit TVs of the interstates. And wouldn't you know it, of all of the cameras in the Las Vegas area, there were only 2 that were offline that night for no good reason. And one of those 2 was the one that would have perfectly captured the airspace between the hotels. So there you go. We tried. I could get this camera, and this camera was northward facing, and I did look extensively through this image, but just could not discern whether I could, whether there was helicopters there or not. I made an effort, and of note, it's strange that the one that would have better captured that was offline that night. All right, let's talk about ballistics. So, were shots fired from the room, or were shots fired from somewhere else? Well, we've seen muzzle flash between the airspace. On the 32nd floor, we don't see windows broken. We don't see flash coming out of the hotel. In this clip, we have concert goers discussing the fact that after hearing the last 2 percussion sounds of the night, only then do they see glass falling from the Mandalay Bay.
We saw police right behind us with rifles, and they asked us to take cover. And so we ran.
There's glass falling from Mandalay Bay.
And so we ran over. This is basically probably not it's probably not the safest place to be, but I'm afraid of
sitting on the ground. Somebody's gonna have to bleach me after this.
So this was put together by Chris over at Truth Tracker. This is fantastic. This is a side-by-side comparison of the timestamps of the last 2 shots. And so we know exactly at what time these concert goers were hearing the glass falling from the hotel. And it's after the shooting was over.
Yes, I would.
First shot.
There's glass falling from Mandalay Bay.
Yes.
So we ran.
No, the 32. 32? Yeah, 32.
Second shot, which according to the body camera footage occurred at 10:16 p.m. 10:16 p.m. is the last time Stephen Paddock was alive. After 2 single shots from a pistol. That's what we're told.
There were 2 percussive sounds coming from that room. There are 2 broken windows. My conjecture is that sounds were probably the windows being blown out after the shooting was over. So if we talk about the distance of these shots, we've got approximately 330 yards to the venue, 700 if you're back in the airspace, maybe even 900 depending on where shots are going. When we talk about the ballistics of a bullet, when the energy drops off substantially, so you lose kinetic energy the further out you are. Many of the people that were hit that night were hit with a high angle of approach. And there were a lot of injuries that didn't have extensive exit wounds. And so that's indicative of bullets losing their kinetic energy, i.e. probably being shot from too far away. So in hunting, you want to close ground because you don't want to just injure the animal that you're trying to kill. And so in this case, it's just strange that so many people were hit and didn't die. And the few that did die, many of them happened to have been hit in the head. And I think that's just an artifact of, a large crowd, and, some bullets will hit heads of people covering or running or what have you, and others will hit the body. But many people survived their injuries. We should ask if the audio signatures that we heard, the audio of the volleys that night, even make sense, for a person allegedly in a room with all these weapons, and he can just swap out the guns as needed to shoot. Yet there are these really long breaks in the cadence of the firing. And so to me, that doesn't make sense on its face. But another big problem with the audio signatures is that you have what are called overlapping rates of fire. So meaning two weapons fired at the same time and with different rates. And, the media and the various journals and whatnot out there tried to tell everybody, basically to gaslight us into thinking that that was from echoes. And so we need to be reminded that echoes don't change the rate of fire, only the pitch. So it was impossible that those overlapping rates were not two different shooters, or at least two different guns, or two different sources of the audio. I reached out to an attorney who had litigated a number of matters for people, on behalf of issues related to the U.S. government. And so this gentleman, my recollection is that he made the claim that they had not proved a single person was hit or injured by a single weapon recovered from the room. And I think, as you've seen, all the bump stock stuff has, they didn't gain any ground as far as regulating bump stocks. That may be because they never could prove that any of those bump stocks were actually used in the death of anybody. Mindy Robinson, and others have done a really nice job looking at audio and 911 calls. And so after the shooter were told the shooter was dead, there were still 911 calls coming in of gunfire along the strip at 11:04, 11:06, 11:08. But I believe it was 10:15-ish that were told the shooter killed himself. And so here we just have some interesting news coverage where the people that were there, the FBI asked for their phones and any evidence that they had. And when they returned the phones, the data was missing. So video was wiped, pictures were wiped, audio was wiped. And so there appeared to have been an effort to maybe, hide evidence. What could possibly be the motive for such a horror story? 2 weeks before the event, an individual on 4chan said that there was going to be a mass casualty incident in the Las Vegas Henderson area. He called it the High Incident Project. He fingered Michael Chertoff and Sheldon Adelson as the participants in this incident, and that the goal was going to be to roll out body scanner technology to, enhance their contracts and effectively make billions of dollars in the ensuing regulations and required installation of these machines in high rises and other places. The very next day, this man, the CEO of Chertoff Group, was in the news talking about how we needed body scanner tech in hotels.
Do you want to know how blatantly, transparently obvious this agenda is? The next day, former Homeland Security official Chad Sweet, who just so happens to also be the co-founder and CEO of the Chertoff Group, went on CNBC, and not only did he say that in a free society, there are no ways to eliminate security risks.
In a free society, there's no way to eliminate this kind of risk.
So what he really means is we need to be less free if we want to be safe. We need to give up our liberty for temporary security. He was also pushing, guess what?
But there are ways, as you said, to potentially mitigate the risk. In addition to intelligence sharing, you can also do a number of steps to establish a secure perimeter using various types of screening technology.
That's right, the X-ray technologies. Already, not even 24 hours later. So I guess the guy in the 4chan group just so happens to have had a crystal ball. That is what I call eerily prescient.
The very next day. Yeah.
The very next day.
Very next day, he's right on there. That's amazing. Me and that 4chan post, like well ahead of time, pointing this out. I'm stunned by that, of course, but not surprised.
Yeah. It's unbelievable, Clayton. I mean, it's really unbelievable. And it was unbelievable to a number of people. And they wrote about it. And so it was covered in Unilad. It was covered on Snopes. And it was my recollection that shortly after that 4chan post kind of started to percolate into public conversation, this story dropped out of the news cycle. There were no more pushes for body scanner tech. There was no more discussion of the shooting. It was like it never happened. You would have the anniversary reports and other things, but that was the extent of it. Insider trading was revealed, so that was interesting. And there was a number of short sales on the MGM stock that was anomalous. So that was another feature. And then this was curious. This is interesting for the public to understand. I made an effort to put some of this information onto Wikipedia, and I understood that if I just put it as an explanation of what happened, it was likely going to be removed. So I tried my very best to at least introduce it into the conspiracy section of the article, which discussed the event. And so I properly sourced it, coded it, and added it to Wikipedia. And so here you'll see that Wikipedia discusses one 4chan post where they talked about the shooter Paddock being a Democrat, blah, blah, blah. And then just below it, I add this section here, and I source it. I even say that the specificity is claimed unproven according to Snopes, etc. Well, to this day, that will not stand. The editors on Wikipedia will not allow this section of text to exist. They do not want you to see that text. This is the current entry, missing that very important part. And today, Chertoff's group is running security for the Supreme Court. So what are we all doing? All right, let's talk about a conspiracy cover-up. It seems to be evident that the body in the room was not Paddock. There were likely shots coming from additional locations, and specifically from the airspace. A number of people look at that and they're muzzle flash, muzzle flash, muzzle flash. It's obvious. The FAA was hiding the records. I mean, there's so many reasons to look at this. And so one of the things that happened in the research community was there was a notion of an exfil. So a couple weeks after the conversation shifted towards maybe they're shooting from helicopters, you get this information being put out there that there was a rooftop exfil, and that the Saudis were involved, and that it had something to do with MBS, and that these helicopters were running cover for this other event, and they were trying to protect the prince. I mean, it's this elaborate, exotic, and frankly ridiculous narrative that got pushed out into the theory world to try to explain what had happened. And my conjecture is that this ridiculous story is actually probably also been pushed to our intelligence committees in the Congress and the Senate, and that they don't have enough of the true fact pattern to understand that they're being lied to. And if they are approached by members of the public saying, hey, what happened in Vegas doesn't mesh with the story that we're told, that their own internal conversations have been steered, somebody has steered them into thinking that this is some national security event related to Saudis, and so therefore they're not going to look into it. That's conjecture on my part, but it wouldn't surprise me. One of the pieces of information that has led many in the research community to think that maybe there's this exfil going on is that on Flight Radar 24, there is a GPS mismatch between the Southwest flight location where it's localized on the screen and where it actually is. And it makes it look as though this plane lands on top of the Mandalay Bay. And so in the exceptional documentary by Mindy Robinson about what happened in Vegas, she discusses what she kind of jokingly refers to as a planecopter or something along those lines. And she's not wrong. It looks as though it's a plane that goes and stops on the top of the hotel. But what's actually happening there when you compare it to the air traffic control audio is it's just a misregistration, because you can hear the traffic controllers speaking to the Southwest pilots and telling them to land on a particular runway and then make a particular turn, which coincides exactly with what you see in this screen recording of the plane landing on the runway. So whoever concocted the exfil story, I think, latched onto this and thought that they could use it to bolster their chaff, that they threw out to evade discovery. Well, who benefited from all of this? Some other independent media companies and outlets did a good job of looking at this, but this was really the great purge on social media and independent media, where Facebook, Instagram, YouTube were just dumping sites left and right. My conjecture is that it was probably related to the truth of the Vegas shooting, and that they really went hard on removing channels because of that fact. I did a podcast with a friend of mine, Jeremy Sladen, about a year ago, and this is a really nicely done interview as well, if you guys want to watch that also, but you'll get a lot of information there. And the curious thing about this particular interview is that his Rumble channel comments were deleted. And I know of no other instances where Rumble has had comments deleted. Rumble's been pretty clean about that. And one of the comments that had been listed or gone to the top had stated that Paddock was a CIA contractor who had left the room earlier that afternoon. True or not, who knows? But that was there. All the comments get deleted. And then the very first comment that gets posted afterwards is a link to a video which steers people towards the narrative that it was an exfil operation. So I think it's a coordinated information warfare tactic to effectively remove actual information, steer folks towards this other explanation, obfuscate, and potentially get away with mass murder. That YouTube channel that it links to did have some interesting comments from the public. Free speech, folks. We need discourse. We can learn a lot from listening to one another. And so that's a veteran discussing the fact that the optical signature is clearly muzzle flash. And then I thought this was pretty good too, because with respect to whether or not it was exfil or something related to the Saudis versus whether it was this body scanner tech profiteering endeavor, the 4chan release, as well as the insider trading, all happened several weeks before the event, whereas Al-Walid's invite to MBS, it should read MBS, was only 1 week before the shooting. So I think on its face, the notion that there was some sort of Prince exfil thing is ridiculous. Why would it make any sense to have a shooter in a room firing away at tens of thousands of people to create a distraction for something? I think it fails on many fronts. And so let's talk about the investigation. So there were efforts made to reach out to our public officials and our professionals to try to get some answers and some resolution. And so, in the appeals processes, many people were copied, to get the information out there. And this is a list of some of those that were reached. I had faith in the process. So this is my own father, Drew Arena. This is a guy you might have seen, William Barr. Drew was an attorney at the DOJ in the 80s and 90s and had a long, amazing career with justice. And frankly, my father was a good man. And so I trusted that perhaps, Barr had been brought back in as Attorney General and that he might do the right thing. And so with sort of a prayer, I submitted requests to the OIG at Justice, asking them to look into it, explaining all the reasons why, the narrative didn't mesh with the fact pattern, that the evidence that was readily available in the public domain, none of it made sense. And hoped for something good to come of it. And so they said that it should be looked at by the FBI Inspections Division. And here we got a response from the Internal Affairs section, and they said that there was nothing there, nothing to look at, and that the matter had been resolved. The next thing that we're going to see is this is the picture of Barr next to my father. Well, in the years from when I filed the OIG complaint to now, I've learned some additional information. And one of the things I learned was listening to an interview by a gentleman named Chip Tatum. And Chip Tatum is being interviewed by Ted Gunderson in the late 90s. And Gunderson was, I believe, the Los Angeles FBI director, field office supervisor, or something to that effect. And Tatum was a Vietnam veteran and then a contract pilot for CIA. And he discusses in this interview the fact that
the cocaine press.
And did you have a picture of that?
In a place called Roos. I have a picture of something.
Okay, we won't go into that. So George Bush was aware of it too. Ollie North was aware of it. How about Clinton?
Bush was absolutely aware of it, and I can say that because on the 24th of March 1985, William Barr, who would later become Attorney General.
Attorney General, know him well, know of him well.
William Barr actually called Vice President Bush via SATCOM and talked to him about the loss of over $100 million in assets of the enterprise. And we all know the enterprise today as being the company that, or the operation that Ollie North set up.
$100 million? And who got their grubby hands on that?
It was decided that there were three entities involved, not one particular person, but Noriega had involvement, that Barry Seal had involvement, and that the governor of Arkansas, who was involved in it at the time, Bill Clinton, had involvement in it.
In that audio, he's discussing Barr as an accomplice in the drug trafficking operation in the United States. The whole MENA connection, the importation of cocaine into Arkansas. He singles out Barr, Clinton, Noriega, Bush. It's the same cast of characters over and over again. This book was published in the late 90s, long before Barr ever returned to office. And so that was sort of a Rosetta Stone for me, to understand why it is that so many things are not resolved. It appears as though an American cartel has seized power, or at least had seized power, and was potentially blocking many, many things that should otherwise be readily resolved.
If you, Xander, had to sort of describe and maybe sum up what you think actually happened, I mean, piecing all of these things together, I always look at sort of Occam's razor. It usually always comes back to money and power, right? So does it make sense that the Chertoff group, Michael Chertoff, and these clowns would have orchestrated something like this in order to carry out a massive implementation of body scanners to make billions of dollars? I know it sounds like something out of a James Bond film, but we've seen it repeatedly now. With COVID, we've seen it repeatedly. So, but if you had to sum up what you think actually happened, what would you say?
Clayton, I'm going to be careful here because I don't want to point the finger at a particular person. It's not the public's role to do that. It's prosecutors' roles to do that. I can say that the evidence that is available certainly creates some suspicion. Profiteering is a real thing. Billions of dollars would certainly be a sizable prize. The other thing to consider is, just control of movement. Scanner tech, additional scanner tech, just a further erosion of our constitutional rights. There's a lot of potential motives. Whether the Chertoff group was involved or not should be the responsibility of a cogent law enforcement agency, or Senate or House congressional committees, legislative committees. On vegastruth.org, I post links to the various committees where we can hopefully initiate some sort of response, to have folks look into it. I think it does make sense. I think the insider trading, I think the reveal on the 4chan post has too much specificity to be ignored. So to me, yeah, it does make sense, but I can't say unequivocally that that's exactly what happened. I just know that the information that's out there cannot be true. It cannot be true that Paddock did that shooting.
Who do you think inside those rooms was carrying out those shots? I mean, ballistics data, autopsies. Does it seem like it was a group of individuals, a paramilitary group? Do you have any sense of what it might be?
Well, whoever did it would have had to have had control of the security of the hotel. Those hotels are riddled with cameras. Every floor, every elevator, every angle, every vantage point, you know, it doesn't make sense that they would not have had control of that security. If the windows were broken out at the end of the shooting event, then somebody would have needed to break those windows out. The individual that we're told tried to intervene with the shooting, Jesus Campos, he was in the area at the time, potentially as a suspect. He broke those windows out. I don't know the answer to that, but somebody might look into it and find out. And what's curious is there were no 911 calls from the hotel. There weren't calls from the adjacent rooms or floors saying, hey, there's automatic weapon fire coming from right there. We didn't get any of that. We got calls from the strip. We got calls from outside. Where were the calls from the hotel? I don't think any shots actually came from the hotel. That's my assessment. I think that in the West, in the Southwest in particular, we have enough concealed carry individuals, private party folks, who, if shots had been coming from a room like that, would have been sheepdogs and would have gone in and would have ended the threat. And so I think that the plotters likely knew that. Look at what happened in Dallas, where those two guys got spun up to go commit a mass murder at an art festival or something, and I mean they were put down, I think, before they even got their rifles fully extended.
Right.
I think that they likely staged this sniper's nest, had that all ready to go, shot from wherever else they shot from, which could have also been from other locations other than aircraft. I'm not saying exclusively aircraft, but the evidence does seem to point that aircraft was used. And then when the time was right, they breached the door and thought that they had the story all, spelled out. But
yeah,
all buttoned up. So I want to talk about just a couple more things, and then I'll wrap up the slideshow. Okay.
Sure.
In this video here, we're going to see a DEA agent discussing the fact that he realized in his war on drugs that the CIA had actually infiltrated the DEA in the 80s.
We didn't know that at the time that a lot of that so-called DEA people they were brought into the DEA were CIA double agents, and these double agents were brought into the DEA to spy on our operations. And a lot of them, they showed up at offices in foreign countries. I had a couple working underneath me that I didn't even know were CIA guys.
And with all of this information, I decided to alert the Intelligence Committee Inspector General and to ask them to please look at it, because clearly the FBI was not doing the right thing. The DOJ was not doing the right thing. Even the FAA was not doing the right thing, because the FAA was having a deferential approach to the FBI. They weren't releasing the records. And I gave all of this information to the ICIG, and they failed to act. And one of the things that they said in their response was, please consider reaching out to Congress. It's like their hands were tied too. It's like the executive branch was completely incapable of resolving this matter. So FAA finally did release some data in 2021. And so what's curious about this is that they released the raw radar records, all except the timestamp between 4:55 UTC, which was 9:55 Vegas time, and 5:10 UTC, 10:10 Vegas time. So they released the raw radar records except for the most important records of the whole event. I spoke to an individual there at FAA, and in this recorded phone call, we learned that the raw data was pulled in 2017, that the FBI told the FAA not to release the raw records, that the raw files were secondary and primary, but that they were missing that most important time section. And then the person that I was speaking to said that that was likely because of just the way it was pulled, that in this major crime event, they pulled the records and just happened to forget to pull the records from the most important part of the whole thing, if you can believe that. And what was so shocking to me was the person I was speaking to, I got the sense that he might have actually believed that. So it's cognitive dissonance. There was a point where I called the FBI tip line to report the tail numbers of these things. And, it's not in my nature to go, narking out every crime. Okay. But in an event where they tried to kill thousands of innocent people, like, we all have to step up, right? So when I was speaking to the tip line and I gave the tail number, the agent on the other end of the phone laughed and basically said, "This call's done because how could I possibly know the tail number?" I mean, it's like the cognitive dissonance in our administrations is just, it's over the top. And it allows people to continue to conduct these kinds of operations because folks are incredulous. They can't believe that somebody could be so evil. From a recent Congressional Oversight Committee report, we learned that after 2001, the FBI's culture was to produce a more centralized and intelligence-driven organization, and that the investigations were largely run out of DC and no longer field offices. And so, something's got to change, folks. I would encourage anybody in law enforcement to reach out to these committees. Anybody who might have additional information, reach out to folks in these committees. I'll share with you that I reached out to these committees and they do not care. But I'm just a smart guy who paid attention, and perhaps somebody with a stronger set of credentials might elicit a response. Maybe somebody watching this interview, this presentation, may know somebody who knows somebody who might care to get something done. Maybe this new administration will get something done. These are all unknown questions at this point. But for anybody that might be a whistleblower, this is just a reminder that you are protected and that you can speak about this stuff without fear of reprisal. And so I would encourage the public, if you're a medical professional, if you have the wherewithal to discern that, hey, that year doesn't match that year, therefore that is not the same person, right? And you can speak to that, then speak to that, right? If you're somebody who understands, the dynamics of radar interpretation and whatnot, and you understand flight control routes and all of that, speak on it. We need to not be shy about this. We need to be okay creating uncomfortable conversations because literally our lives depend on it. So I think that's kind of the takeaway from this. What I hope to share with folks, I hope to encourage others to do more, to reach out and to try to get things done. And so I'll leave this quote with Twain. And that's a wrap for the presentation. I understand it's a little awkward running a PowerPoint over an internet call, but I appreciate your patience with that. And
well, thank you, Xander, for all of that. And I just wanted to step back and watch all of the data and allow our audience to soak it in without me stepping all over it. So I think people can draw their own conclusions. I think the evidence in many ways, speaks for itself. And I think, even where you started, looking at the body of this guy, not the same guy. Why was he chosen? Why do you think Stephen Paddock was chosen as the shooter in this, and all of the death, all of the carnage is tied to this guy?
I don't know if he volunteered or was chosen, but he was certainly involved in some manner. We do have the footage of him entering the hotel, bringing the weapons up, being in the hotel. What's interesting is we don't have a continuous time stream of what happened. They just released little snapshots, just enough to show us that, yeah, hey, he was there. But he probably had a history of working, in some sort of clandestine or, illicit operations. And, I try to envision what it's like on the other side. If I were doing something like this, I might make a proposal like, we'll pay you X amount of dollars and, we're going to take care of you when it's done, and talk them into doing it, and then make sure nobody ever sees him again. These
people are evil. These people are absolutely demonic. And when Americans wake up and understand this deep state, and specifically what Trump's trying to do right now to eliminate this, and you realize the the multi-headed hydra that exists. It's deeply disturbing. Whether you're looking at child trafficking operations that are run by the Department of Homeland Security, what they did on 9/11 and the cover-up there to get us into, have a Patriot Act and now give up most of our civil liberties. These people are evil, and they will stop at nothing. And I'm convinced of that. It's sad. It's really sad to think that that's the case. And I know people compartmentalize these things. They block out certain things. They can just look at, the border invasion, U.S. southern border, and what these people do. But it goes much deeper than that. And I think you're seeing the most evil pieces of this with what you just exposed here, Xander.
I think for me too, like the gaslighting that goes on when we see something that's so obvious, and yet we're all told to just say, "Oh, the sky is red. The sky is red." It's really important that the public be able to speak up and talk about what's actually going on, what has actually happened. So, what I mean by that is that I think that there's room for resolution. Okay, I think that there's room for recovery in this country. But I think that a really critical part of that has to be reconciling these things that are so obviously wrong, so obviously lies. And yes, I think evil is an appropriate word, and perhaps justice is what is needed. But even if we cannot get there, perhaps a Truth and Reconciliation Committee could, help to unravel a lot of this, help to kind of just debride the wound so that we could at least move forward in some way where we're not further inundated with these kinds of atrocities. If that was my role in really getting involved in the Vegas shooting, I'd spent so many years with respect to 9/11 truth that I felt like the Vegas shooting was perhaps a side run. We could maybe get to some answers and to some resolution through that. And what I learned is that, just how deeply broken the system really is. So it is my hope and prayer that this next administration with, voices like Bobby Kennedy and others in the ear of the president we might really truly get somewhere. So that is my hope.
I agree. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. It sounds like you are as well. And I hope that...
Cheers.
Cheers to that. Thank you for this amazing research, Xander. If people want to learn more or dive into the documents, where can people go?
VegasTruth.org is the best location for that. And, forgive me, folks, because I have another life. This is not my primary role. Like, I'm out there mountain biking and doing clinical healthcare and, trying to have a family and all of that. So, but the website is relatively well maintained. The documents are there. You can review them. You can watch the videos, and please use the reporting links. Reach out to the Homeland Security committees, reach out to the Senate investigation committees, and then go to those committee websites and look at the representatives and the senators in your area and call their offices. They are human beings just like you and I, but they will not do anything unless they are asked to do it, and they need to be asked to do it vociferously. So please engage them. And I think that maybe with that, we might get somewhere.
Well said.
VegasTruth.org.
Thank you, Xander. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Clayton, very much.